Oh man, if you guys could only see what goes on before the camera starts. So again, we're gonna introduce ourselves because remember we forget to do that. I am Terrell Harris,
and I'm Brooke Harris, and I'm here to say, okay, I'm just kidding.
And we have Joe. Rhyme. We have Joe in the background.
Not Harris.
And we are pastors of the upcoming church plant, The Open Box. Today's discussion is going to be about relationships. So we are approaching our 7th year of marriage.
Woo!
I made it. And no, but seriously, we're approaching our 7th year of marriage. And what we want to do is chat about marriage in general, relationships in general, and we're going to share what we learned in that 7 years, right? So we're going to do something a little different. As opposed to starting off with scripture, we're just going to dive right into it. So the question I have for us in general to answer the first question was, where exactly do you think God is in our relationship? Go ahead. Do you think God exists in our relationship? Do you think there was a divine being that brought us together and joined us?
I do think there has been divinity in our relationship because
Joe said
because I'll just tell my brief story about how we met.
Mm-hmm.
One day, long ago. No. So
the heavens cracked and God spoke.
So one day, so at our old church, at one of our old churches, he was a part of the leadership team of the singles ministry.
Yeah. Fellas, singles ministry, where is that? Just kidding.
And anyway, and I used to go to the singles ministry events. I used to go to the events and then I stopped going because I honestly started to feel like it was like a women's ministry and I wasn't going to the singles ministry for a women's ministry when there was a women's ministry. So I stopped going but I would still get their emails about the events and things they were doing. So one day I got an email about something they were having, a Bible study or something, I don't know. And it piqued my interest and I just had this feeling that I should go.
Yep.
So I went. And
best decision you ever made in your life. Well, yeah.
Anyway, so I got on my I got on my clothes and I put on some nice little heels. I don't know why.
I dressed up. God was telling you. Need to look nice for your future man.
When you get that feeling that you should go somewhere, you need to, look good. So I went, and during the Bible study, it was going cool. And then there was a point where there was a woman in the Bible study who I went to college with. So we stepped out. I think maybe we went to the restroom or something. I think, and we spent like the rest of the time talking. So we missed like half of the session. I was like, man, that was really nice to connect with her. And when we came back in, it was over. People were standing around talking. And I knew the president of the singles ministry at that time. So I chatted with him. Terrell was there. Mm-hmm. We had seen each other before, but we never knew each other. So I think once or twice we might have just said hello just because we met eyes. And at that time, we just started chatting. And we were chatting about singles ministry and events.
Marketing.
And I remember in particular, we were talking about marketing, but I said something to them.
Wait a minute, digital marketing, and that's exactly what I'm into now. Who knew? Go ahead.
I said something to them, and they looked at me like I was crazy because I was starting to talk about how some people might be single, period. Like, we always have this talk, like singles ministry, like we're waiting for marriage, but you might have some people who just remain single. And how are we, addressing that? And they're looking at me like I'm crazy, like, no, I would never remain single.
Nobody
wants to remain single, but I'm like, but let's look at this realistically. Like, that happens. And so, why stay in La La Land? I do think you should, work on it, think about it, do things, whatever. So anyway, we exchanged contact information because he was like, oh, you have great ideas. And I was like, oh, thanks. We exchanged contact information. Where was I going with that story?
Where God is.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Because I will get lost in my own story. And so I felt like, that I had like a divine leading to go to that. And from that, we developed a friendship. We got together, and here we are married. Saturday will make 7 years.
Yep, 7 years. So for me,
So that was one of the ways.
It was weird for me. Now that you say that, I remember in particular at church, because not even considering, but it just came across my mind to approach somebody else. This was before we met in the singles ministry, and I this is one of the only times like I heard a crystal clear voice that I knew had to be God, and I heard it was like something like, actually, it was "Leave her alone," and I was like, "Whoa!" In dating and stuff like that, you get signs and you get confirmation, but I had never heard anything audible like that. It was clear, like, "Leave her." All right, man, your hands off. And so with that, I think a lot of things happen. So I see God in where we're going in ministry and stuff like that. That's obvious. But even for me, when we met, I didn't like to read. Like, I would read stuff on the internet, magazines here and there, but books, never.
Right.
For those of you who don't know the story, like when we met, she gave me a book. It was
I think it was How to Hear from God.
How to Hear from God, Joyce Meyer. She gave me a deadline, like, read this, I'm taking my book back. So I read the book, and then
So she was bossy from day one.
Yeah.
I am not bossy. I am just assertive.
Assertive.
She was assertive.
I was assertive.
Read this book, or else I'm going to take it back. I read it in the course of us dating. Before we got married, I read like 20-something books, like in a year.
I kept giving him books, and then his appetite just grew.
But not only did you keep giving me books, you gave me books that were interesting. So it was like, hey, you don't take. I give you a lot of credit for this, to get me latched onto this. I don't think you know what was happening at that time, but it was getting me on this path, because let's be real about it. When we met, I just knew I was gonna be in IT for like 20 some odd years, 30 years, and then maybe retire and become a teacher. Like, ministry wasn't even on the radar prior to us meeting at all.
Right.
So I think that's where God is in our relationship.
Yeah. And I think I also just see God in how we continue to grow.
Yeah.
And grow individually, but then how we're seeing ourselves and our individual visions and callings kind of merge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not separate. I think we're on similar paths, and then with this, they intersect and stuff like that. And then we still have our own separate stuff, which ultimately revolves around helping people.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna move on. Let's see. Questions do we want to get into?
Well, can I just sidetrack a little bit for a moment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any experience with that, Jeff?
With what?
With feeling like God has been in
a relationship?
Whether or not it was leave or stay.
I've had experience with both, actually. I think most recently I've experienced God in my relationship in a way that things that, like, career things, different visions that I've had in my life, I've had to question before with, I thought were life partners. But I see my call in my most recent relationship, I see my calling being more possible than I ever have before.
Oh, your calling. We'll chat about that offline.
We're talking about relationships. Not calling. That was a couple weeks ago.
Okay, yeah.
We can always revisit calling. We can always.
So where we're going to go now, we're going to talk about foundation. We talked about relationship with God. So when I mapped this particular portion out, I wanted to talk about some of the things we set up foundationally that didn't know that we're going to have impact. So I think we both have a relationship with God going in, which of course is key foundation.
Right. But then I'll also add that we've done this at different times, and then we've kind of gotten out of it, and now we're back into it, where we not only have a relationship with God individually, but we worship together, outside of Sunday church. We have a particular time where we're doing it together.
Worship Wednesdays.
Right, Worship Wednesdays, and we're intentional about how we're doing that together, so that it's not just I have my relationship with God, you have yours, but also we have ours.
that, and one of the key things is somebody told us early on that it's beneficial for us to pray together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we were doing it, we weren't doing it, we started back up. And for me at least, I understand when we pray together, I think a lot of things smoothen out. I don't think we stay mad at each other as much. I think ultimately it helps us be at peace with one another.
Yeah, and be more connected.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So one of the things I find that was important for us in our relationship was not going into debt for a wedding. And it's weird because, ultimately, I anticipated, spending, a decent penny on a wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and then you shut it down. You were like, you didn't really want to do it, and I was like, forget it, I'll plan it.
He did.
Yeah, I was like, I got it. We got to map out this plan. We gotta do it at this place, and then we just decided to scrap it. And oftentimes with weddings, I'm not sure what in our culture or society makes people want these fancy weddings. And now I understand, it's a celebration and you're celebrating the union of two individuals, but to go into extreme debt just for one day, I didn't necessarily want to do it.
But that's because you want the dream.
Yeah.
Like you want your dream wedding. You want the dress to have the bridesmaids, to have the family. Like you want the dream, and you get it for a day, for a few hours.
It's not even a whole day. The interesting thing about
Takes a whole day. But.
The interesting thing about it. So what happened with us? My dream was to always. This was my dream wedding. My dream was always to have a wedding and figure out how the guests were going to pay for their own food. I just put that out there. I was frugal. I was like, man, it would be cool somehow if the guests could pay for their own food, because this is gonna put a hole in my pockets. And also, but catch this. So what we did is we went to the Justice of Peace, and we decided to have a cookout instead to join both families together. So the people in town brought food. We grilled, we cooked out, and then we asked for gift cards.
I don't even know that we did. I think we just asked for people to bring
We had
food, and then people just, because it was a wedding, I think they gave us stuff.
Gift cards, yeah. We didn't get any gift cards. I think
you did? Okay.
Yeah, gift cards specifically. And I think we ended up making like $200 off of our wedding. So if anybody needs a wedding planner, this guy here will this guy here,
not Joe, who does that professionally.
Not the actual. We could work her into it. But yeah. Oh, my bad. Maybe I need to reel that back since that's your business.
No,
Never mind. Go with the professional.
But I will add that, I mean, if people want the wedding, they want the wedding.
Yeah.
Okay. I will say that for me, the reason why we scrapped it was not because we decided. It was actually because I decided. And the reason why I decided it is because as my self-journey progressed, I started to learn what it was that I really wanted and what was really reflecting me.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that a wedding didn't really reflect what I wanted. But we were going to do it until I went on a trip. I went to South Africa, which was amazing. And I did a lot of reflecting and everything. And when I came back and I realized what I really wanted, it was not that. And so once I came back, 2 weeks later, maybe-ish, 2.5 weeks later, we got married.
Yep.
Yeah. So no matter what, I think it's important to realize what it is that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And what you want as a couple, and not necessarily, I mean, if you want the wedding, okay, that's okay. There are inexpensive ways to do the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's not what you really want, then you have to go for what you really want.
I think it's extremely stressful too to start off a life with someone in an extreme amount of debt.
Yeah.
Not house debt or educational debt, but just like stuff debt. Like,
Yeah.
we have these pictures, like it just.
Yeah. No judgments though. Invite us to your wedding.
Absolutely.
They're lovely.
No, not invite us to the wedding. Let us do your wedding.
Well, I just wanted to eat.
I was gonna say either. So we're multi. We have a lot of skill sets in this small group. Brooke can marry you. I can shoot your photography because I do pictures. I can do your social media. Joe can plan. So you got the whole circle right here covered. Open Box Services. Visit the openbox.com/contact.
Find us.
Find us there. All right. We're gonna skip this one. what has been your experience becoming one? In terms, when they say married, you become one person or one.
From I to we.
Yeah, from I to we.
Or me to we.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
What's been your experience with that?
I think that is a challenge.
Okay.
I think it's definitely a challenge because everybody comes. I'll speak for myself. I came to the table with my own way of doing things, my own way of thinking, just about me, because I live in this body, in this life.
Yep.
And when we got married and I had to share my life with you, share my space with you, share money, share whatever, like just everything, like it's different. And a lot of times it's like so the one thing that helps is we have our own bathroom.
Oh yeah, the bathroom.
And today I bought you your own Q-tips. But I did. So sometimes things like that
can make smart choices.
So
the
right? Key to oneness is Q-tips and a separate bathroom. And everything that's.
But it is a challenge because you have your own way, and sometimes the way that I think about something or want to handle something is not the way you do.
Yeah.
And it can be a battle at times where I think I'm right and you think you're right. And we're focusing on right and not how to be harmonious in relationship with one another.
Yeah.
And it's easy to kind of not even think about that because you're thinking about, like you talk about it all the time about like fighting for your position.
Yeah. I was going to talk about that.
Yeah. So the journey, it has been a journey, and I think we're still on it. There's still some things for us to still grow in, but we've come a long way.
Yeah, I think that initially it is about jockeying for your position and then trying to figure out. It's like you're two people coming together in one house, you jockey for position, and then for me, what I realized that it's not necessarily a need to jockey for position. We're on the same team and we're working towards the same common goal. Now, we might have things that frustrate us or get on each other's nerves about. But I think ultimately, once you realize or get to the place that you figure out that my plan is to be in relationship or married to Brooke forever. So some of the stuff is literally forever. So some of the stuff we were arguing about initially, it was just kind of, it doesn't make a difference. Like, so I remember decorating. That's always the big thing. And I had my nice leather sofas. She says she doesn't think they're
No,
leather.
it's not that I don't think it was leather. It was not. Okay.
But the
man-made leather is not leather.
But the challenging thing about moving in was a lot of my stuff was new because I hadn't been there for that long, but it represented a single male. So then we had to figure out, all right, what stuff could go, what stuff couldn't go. So I think that took a lot of time. Ultimately, the couch got ripped up.
It disintegrated because leather doesn't do that. So it disintegrated, and we had to replace it.
It was something about the cracks and the dog dug into it and stuff like that.
That's what plastic does. It disintegrates.
But ultimately, I think for me, once I got to a position where I just let go of things, a lot of the stuff doesn't really bother me anymore because, like I said, we're a team, so there's no need to kind of fight and jockey for position. I think
a part of that isn't necessarily like, say, for example, when it came to the furniture, it's not like about jockeying for position, but sometimes you want to see yourself in this space, in this relationship. And so that's not really about position as it's about how do I see team? And team is us, not team is you with me added on the side. Like, that's what that is. So it's not really
but when I say jockey positions, some people approach a marriage like somebody is going to be in charge.
Right.
So I think depending on who you marry, some people have a traditional stance in marriage, some people don't. I think our stance in marriage is shared roles and responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say jockey position, it's not just for decorating, but it was for everything. It was for responsibilities, roles around the house, what it is to be a husband. Is it my job to take out the trash? And then we kind of toy backwards and forth, like who leads in what instance, and so I think it was about jockeying for position initially,
but also understanding expectations and ideas about roles.
I don't think people talk about that. I think we continue to have that conversation as time, went on, and I think we still have that now because ultimately sometimes it changes. So for me, I remember when I was in school working full time, our roles have to change because I'm not going to be home as much. So Brooke may have had to handle the vast majority of everything that was happening in the house, whether it was cooking, whether it was paying the bills. Maybe even some of the handy stuff. And I think, when things switched and when I got back to just working, then I had to readjust and, expectations changed as related to my roles in the house.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think what really helped was just us being sure that we communicated about that because I feel like everybody comes to a relationship with certain expectations.
Yeah.
Whether it's expectations about, well, what do you do as the wife? What do you do as the husband? What do you do in the house? What do you do as it relates to taking care of kids, which we have not in that position right now.
Yeah.
So all of that, and then when you don't communicate about that, when you don't know what that other person believes about that, I think that can cause conflict.
Yeah.
And the more that we talked about those things, we kind of understood and were able to have less conflict. About it.
All right, so we have I think a few videos and articles and stuff on communication. So I'm not necessarily gonna address that in this particular discussion. What I'll do is I'll link to our communication video. One of the things I wanted to talk about is how do you get over or through when your spouse disappoints you? Question for you.
That's a question?
Yeah. How do you, like, when I disappoint you, how do you get over it?
Well, I just learned tapping, so even though you ain't getting on my nerves.
Okay, Yama.
I think it's tough. It's tough at times because it's different. The thing that I've learned that is very different when it comes to how I have to interact with you versus how I interact with somebody else.
Yeah.
No matter what their relationship is, whether it's parent, sibling, friend, like whatever. Like,
yeah, because we sleep in the same bed.
We sleep in the same bed. We share the same house, and so if you disappoint me, I have to deal with that in a totally different way than with them, because even though it's not good for me to harbor any feelings or whatever with them, I can, because there's distance.
And you don't have to address them.
And I don't have to address it right away. But with you, if I'm holding on to something on, I'm seeing you all the time, and I gotta cook food or you cooking and I'm hungry, and I'm gonna interact with you so much that it doesn't serve me to not find a way to address this disappointment, whether it's directly with you or working through the emotion of it on my own. Yeah.
I think for me, what I'm starting to learn and been learning in the process in the course of our relationship is not to take things so personal. So like if you do something that I don't like or it disappoints me or I'm frustrated, we have a lot of time to work on this. So I don't necessarily need to take it so personal or get so angry about it, because there's ways to address it that you may not know how I feel about a particular situation.
Right.
So I think ultimately we have to be in a position where we look at ourselves and figure out how we're going to respond to certain situations. And I think a lot of us may not understand our triggers and things that tick us off and things that make us angry, because some of us, we may not have seen two individuals live in close quarters together. For some of us, we may be carrying baggage from past relationships into a current relationship. So I think it's challenging for us to be in close quarters with somebody when we hadn't really reflected on things that are going on internally.
Right.
So, for me, as I continue to go on this journey and try to dig deep and get a little bit more in touch with the spiritual aspect of what actually exists within me, it's been easier to deal with some of the disappointments, because I know ultimately I'm responsible for how I respond in certain situations. And if I respond in a crazy manner, attitude, yelling, or something like that, ultimately that's just going to make the situation worse.
Yeah.
So it's one thing, to say, you disappoint me, you upset me, and I'm hurt. There's another thing to spaz out and start yelling and kicking stuff and getting attitudes and throwing plates out the door and punching holes in the wall.
Yeah.
Some of which is
True story.
true story.
True story.
Some of which has happened.
True story.
Yeah. So,
You thought?
what? Some surprise over here from the gallery. I've grown. I've
No,
grown.
this was him.
I've grown.
This was him. Not at me though. Outside.
No. Yeah, outside. Take the plate and throw it like a frisbee. Somebody want your meal?
Do we have food on it?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, it had food. It was something about something was going on. This was probably during that year when we were arguing. Something was going on. I think
I would have never cooked for you again.
No, she had no. What happened was I think she had already put my food in the garbage disposal. So I think I took her plate. It was snowing too. I took her plate. It was just like, oh, you want to play games? In the snow.
So nobody ate that.
Nah, it was lunch.
Oh, you know I'm gonna find a way to eat. So.
But I think ultimately, it's, the key is, I think everybody's gonna have a rough area or rough patch. The key is how you respond to that and how you grow from that. So It's not to say that if you come in knowing all your triggers and knowing everything that you're not gonna have challenging times, that you're not gonna argue, but you have to know how to argue and how to respond. So it's not. We have to get to the point where we don't demean each other. We have to get to the point. Yeah, fight fair.
Right.
We have to get to the point where we knew. So one of the things I know about Brooke is her trigger is yelling. So if I yell, then that sets her off. And the trigger for me is like tone and attitude. So I think over the course of the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, instead of responding to yelling and tone, we let each other know, like, hey, you're approaching that danger zone. Tone it, bring it down a notch. I think it's worked. I don't think we've had any major arguments, anything that lasts long or anything like that.
Right. No, but paying attention to the bigger picture, because I know, and I get caught up in this sometimes where I'm like focusing on the moment and I'm upset about this, but then there's been like, if you were to ask me what many of our arguments were about, like over the years, I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah, I've forgotten all of them.
Forgotten so many. So if that's the case, then is this really that
big?
Is it really that important in that way? And I know I might feel like that in the moment, but feelings aren't facts. And I choose to feel how I feel. Like, you don't make me feel a certain way.
Good point.
So I have to be responsible for my own feelings to process through. And it's still a journey in learning how to do that.
Yep.
And going and getting better and better at it. But it's important because, like if you remember this stuff, what is this about?
Yeah, nothing major.
Right.
Any questions for us?
Any thoughts?
Any thoughts?
No, I mean, I had a thought. We kind of have moved places, but I know for me, for a while, I would always get very discouraged when a fight happened. Mm-hmm. And arguing is normal. And I think that helped me, because I would literally be like, oh my God, it's over. Like, we got into an argument. Like, it's the end of the world, But people argue. You argue with your siblings. You argue with your boss. Like, people naturally, usually, have some type of issue at some point over time. So arguing is normal to a degree.
So the thing is, it's a good thing that you mentioned that, because oftentimes people see conflict as negative, but I think the responses to conflict are negative, but conflict usually brings resolution. It'll bring understanding, and it'll bring clarity if things are addressed properly. So out of a lot of our conflict, we've learned about each other. I've learned what ticks her off. She's learned what ticks me off.
And also learning, like, you can learn what's important to that person.
Exactly.
Because they weren't expressing it in a way that you understood. And,
All right, so last one. Most important thing somebody should know about marriage and making it last long, outside of God being the foundation of your relationship.
God being the foundation, being sure you have a friendship that's a part of your actual relationship, being sure that you keep your lines of communication open, being sure that you grow together, but continue to have your own sense of individuality.
Yep.
Being sure that you understand that not every relationship is the same. So what somebody else does and it works for them doesn't mean that that is going to work for you guys, but it also doesn't mean that it won't work for you guys. So be open to learning. That's all I got right now.
And I would say, I would add to it, I think she kind of took all of them, but one of the things I want to say is for those individuals who are seeking to get married or in a relationship now where you're not married, understand this. We're two whole individuals, so Brooke doesn't complete me. We've come together to form something new, but don't think of a relationship as, oh, this is my wife, this is my husband, she's going to make me or she's going to complete me. That's not the way. You are a whole individual already. And the other thing is, one of the most important things that I had mentioned, you have to be flexible with where your relationship is going to go and some of the things that can happen. Because Brooke has been, super supportive and flexible with my career path, going down this journey with me, as I kind of migrated from, the typical 9-to-5 IT situation. So be flexible in your relationship. And also remember, the vast majority of what you go through can be fixed. I would say stay away from friend professionals, people who you think have knowledge, but they're not professionals. And actually, if you're seeking to work on your relationship, get real professional help. There's relationship coaches, there's relationship specialists, there's therapists. And from my perspective, God placed these individuals here for a specific reason to help us with our relationships. That's it. That's all I have.
And I'm sure there's more, but
Yep. So if you have any questions about relationships or you want to just chat in general, you can email us directly at info@theopenbox.com. You could contact me on social media at Mr. Terrell Harris, at Lambda Brook, at loco_joko. Yeah, I got it right that time. Don't forget, we'll also be launching our first worship experience September 18th, 2016. So if you're interested in helping us out, visit theopenbox.com, hit the contact button, or like I said, you can email us at info@theopenbox.com. Peace and blessings. You guys have a good one.